I was running my party, Bard, Sorcerer, Fighter, Cleric, and Barbarian, through a dungeon when they reached the final boss of the first floor, a Sybarex. After a tough fight where the Bard and Sorcerer were hit with Feeble Mind, leaving them with Charisma and Intelligence score of 1 for 30 days, and the Cleric was killed, the Fighter managed to kill with a critical hit. Searching his corpse, I described them finding a circlet radiating magic energy. After attunement, I tell them they now have 2 wishes guaranteed to pass, no shenanigans on my part. He used the first wish to revive and cure everyone from feebled mind, and they decided to save the second wish for later. Descending into the second floor, they found themselves in the middle of a swamp with an artificial sky above them, and were immediately attacked by giant spiders. Fortunately, a tribe of kobolds came to their rescue and explained the situation in the swamp. The staircase leading to the next level is open. They're free to take it if they want, but if they help the kobolds kill their rival in the swamp, they will give them the tribe's treasures, 2 legendary magic items. The party obviously agrees. The tribe chief then tells them the leader of the spiders is Lilith, goddess of spiders and chaos, who was imprisoned in the dungeon decades ago. I figured that at that point the party would have one of them scout ahead and find out Lilith is chained to a magic boulder and half sealed away, weakening her greatly. Instead, they decided to attack head-on and hope for the best. The fight itself was a slugfest, with PCs dying and coming back to life multiple times and Lilith using progressively stronger spells. Eventually, the sorcerer turns to me and says he'd like to use the wish. I nod and start pulling up the level 9 spells, thinking they'd use Meteor Swarm or something to enter. They don't. Instead, the sorcerer says he wishes Lilith, the goddess of evil, to become lawful good. It takes me a minute to process what he said before shrugging and describing the look of horror on Lilith's face as she realized what's happening to her. How the look changes after her very nature twisted into itself and she grasped all the horrible things she had ever done in her immortal life. And finally, her transformation before their eyes into a goddess of lawful good. They break her chains and free her, and she rewards them by gifting them all with boons, something I planned to have happen if one of them came in contact with her blood. She then bids them farewell and teleports away. Needless to say, I didn't plan for this to happen, but the players seemed to like her, so I decided to include her as a major part in the rest of the campaign. And that's how the party gained a powerful god as an ally. I was DM for a campaign that took 2 years. The campaign had almost reached its end, and I had planned for a little treat for my group. The players had to infiltrate the city Windermere and kill their king. The city was in war with the rest of the country, so they guarded their gate with care. Only people known to the city was allowed to enter. Because of this, the players were given a potion each. They had to mix the potion with blood from a person. Then when you drink the potion, you will transform into that person for 3 days. 5 hours from the city, there was a tavern. Many visited this tavern before entering the city. The city was located on an icy mountain, so 5 hours travel was rough. The players waited near the tavern for a group of people they could use. I had already planned whom they would meet, and I successfully withheld my laughter. I described to them a carriage driven by what seemed like a fancy butler. The players immediately knew this was a group of nobles and thought it a perfect fit. If they only knew. Our gnome fighter quickly grabbed the butler and mixed his blood with his potion. Our elf barbarian opened the door to the carriage and tried to intimidate the people inside. His intimidation worked on the parents, but the hidden trap was the son of the nobles. His name was Elliot, a human 15 years of age. Elliot was very strong for his age. He slammed into our barbarian and grappled him. Elliot was very strong, but he was not the smartest cookie. He had an intelligence score of 5, so slow-witted is putting it mildly. I knew one of my players had to turn into Elliot and play as a bird-brained man-child. Our gnome had already chosen the butler. The fighter picked the mother Amelia. The father became our half-elf rogue, and my brother, who played the human druid, had to turn into Elliot. The time they realized that the city knew these people and that they had to play them convincingly was priceless. The only one who didn't laugh was my brother. I thought he was mad, but no. He was getting into character. The way my brother played Elliot was amazing. I think it was his best role play I have ever seen him do. I knew all along that my brother was a great idiot. The players had now transformed into a noble family and made them consume a sleeping potion that worked for a couple of days. The players knew they couldn't just leave them. They would risk their cover being blown if they were found. They were all some kind of good of linemen, so they couldn't just kill them either. Therefore, they came up with a genius idea. First, our barbarian rented a room at the tavern near the city. Then he returned to the caravan with the noble family inside. He pushed the family into a bag of holding and sprinted back to his room in the tavern. A bag of holding only holds so much air, so our barbarian had to be quick so the nobles would not suffocate. He pulled them out of the bag inside the room and left them there. He had told the barkeep not to disturb them for the next couple of days. I was amazed by how creative my players were, so they didn't have to kill the family or leave any clues behind. Finally, they could enter the city. They got a warm welcome and was escorted to the family estate. At this time, the players had really gotten into character, and they didn't miss any chance to boss around with our gnome who had picked the butler. He had to drive them around and make them food and carry their things. At first he refused, but the others made the argument, what if someone sees us and you don't act as a butler? Won't the other nobles be suspicious? He ended up being the perfect butler. Hours later, they believed they had made a great choice by choosing the noble family. However, they quickly discovered that the family had some secrets. The father Rupert had used his son Elliot in gladiatorial battles and was summoned at night to settle a debt. My brother did not waste the opportunity to show how great he was in acting like a numbskull, and it was hilarious. My brother ended up crushing another man's skull with his +2 mace. By the way, the fight was not meant to be to the death. I guess my brother got a little too much into character. My brother never had to pay for his crimes, but the real Elliot was not so lucky. Just to preface this story, we are not an evil party. Well, not supposed to be at least. We have a half-elf wizard, a human rogue, tiefling bard, and a halfling druid. The party meets up when the Grand Prince of Kuvas, Fantasy Russia, asks us to help him for a large reward. We're supposed to travel to 3 different towns and convince the prince at each town to stop paying tribute to the High Elves. The High Elves pretty much conquered Kuvas a while back, and the Grand Prince Hedon hired us to help stop their rule. We had just finished convincing the first prince and now we're off to the second town where things go wrong. The prince of this town is willing to meet us, but is too concerned with the opinions of the merchants. He thinks that if he decides to stop paying tribute, his state will be weakened enough by the war against the High Elves that the merchants will be able to seize power. A similar thing happened in another city within this world where a previous campaign took place, which is why the prince is so worried about this. The party sort of wanders around a bit, thinking of what to do while shopping for magic items. A lot of magic stores were robbed by hobgoblins and their leader, Felicius, who introduced himself with some sort of projection while we invaded one of his storage buildings. He told us that he was on our side, but we didn't really believe him, so we ignored him, mostly. I found a broken broom of flying and got it repaired. The party eventually concluded that, to get the merchants and the general human population on our side, we must create resentment towards the High Elves. We hear that one High Elf of high status is throwing a party, and two of us turn invisible to sneak in, me, the wizard, and the bard. The rogue and druid hang out outside. I can't really explain why we came to this conclusion, but we were kinda desperate and said beforehand that we were going to frame this guy for child profiteering. But because of some of us are supposed to be good, we said we'd only do it if we found evidence that he was a horrible person. Well, I sneak into his office and look for proof. Finding nothing that would suggest his downright evilness, I decided, screw it, and forged some incriminating letters to stash there. I then hang out and eavesdrop. The bard polymorphs into a young child, which we realized later that he shouldn't have been able to do this, but it was too late. Then he goes into the basement. He ties himself up and cries for help before being found by two humans. They untie him and he runs upstairs to get more attention. He is taken from the party and the rest of us follow. I use sending to inform the prince of our crime in a weird, cryptic way. The prince then pretends to send the kid home to his mom, and we wait several days before committing our next horrible crime. We decided that we are going to start a riot, marching to this poor man's house. So we start the riot. People start throwing stuff at high elf establishments, and we pretty much start a race war against the elves. The riot ends with us just running away as the rioters beheaded the man we framed. My half-elf character is pretty scared from this, and so is the druid, but we can't complain as we decided to do this. While the prince is rightfully distraught from this, he does agree to stop paying tribute, so we technically did our jobs there and headed back to the main town. Tildir. To influence public opinion, we framed an innocent man of child profiteering, started a riot and a race war that leads to his death, and then just pack up and leave. Did I mention we're not supposed to be an evil party,